Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and our continuing series on the MiSter DE10 Nano project, and we got a fun and unexpected Saturday video for you today because yesterday around 1:30 my time in Chicago, SRG320 released an update to the Sega Saturn core. So the newest core is now 630, some new games are playing, some games are working better, and it also means SRG320 is totally fine where he is, and if you know his situation, that's super important, we're glad to hear it. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But one game everyone has been asking to see a retest of is Burning Rangers, not only because it's one of the best 3D Sega Saturn games around, but it also pushes the Sega Saturn architecture harder than pretty much any other 3D game on this system. The last few times this was tested right around this area here in the training, when that door tried to open it would most of the time freeze on everybody. I am here to say that now you can get into the first mission and you can play Burning Rangers. There still seems to be a few graphical glitches, but it's hard to tell where the core starts and where the Sega Saturn hardware stops, because this game could be a little bit glitchy on real hardware too. So it's one of those things we will see as this core evolves even further how it's working. But the fact is, you can get into Burning Rangers today and you can play around with this. Now with the new core, there's a very big caveat on how you would load the BIOS, and I will explain that in just a moment. But it's going to trip a lot of you up, so make sure that when I get to that section you pay attention. I will very clearly demarcate it with both a title as well as me speaking. But right now on the core, there's so much to be had, and we are still testing this. A few of the tests in this video are going to be from the previous core that will work basically the same on the current core. I did retest some of these games in the background once I got my core working, and I can tell you that it is exactly the same. But getting Burning Rangers running on the MiSter core is spectacular, because the best part is you can play it in English, and voice navigation is a very big component of this game. Now I do own a US copy and I've owned it for years, but if you wanted to actually buy a copy, it is an extreme fortune to get a hold of one. Most people that want a physical copy have it on the Japanese release, but it is impossible to play if you don't speak Japanese. But you will see a lot of the lighting effects here on MiSter are primarily working. It's hard to say if everything's 100% perfect. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think about the look of this game. But it's one of those things, the last time we checked it out, you couldn't even get into the first level. Now you can basically complete the first level, and that is massive progress on the core. SRG320 is plugging away, things are getting better, and it is so much fun to see. Now on the update, one of the games he mentioned specifically in the Patreon post, and I can't publish that there because you should be a Patreon member, definitely think of supporting him, he could use it. Skeleton Warriors had some changes. Now when you get into this core, you have to rename boot.rom in the Saturn Games folder to boot.bin. If you do not do that, you will get a black screen and nothing will work. So just make sure you go into your MiSter folder hierarchy on a PC and rename the file. You then manually load the BIOS from the core menu when it comes up. If you do not do that, you will not get anything on screen and the core will not function as of the making of this video. So just be very careful about that. If you leave me a comment and say it doesn't load, I'm going to ask you if you paid attention. But getting into Skeleton Warriors here, it's a ton of fun as far as the game's concerned. It's definitely like 10 to 20% janky, but you know I love my jank, and it is working exactly as would be expected compared to original hardware as far as I can tell. Now it has been some years since I've looked at Skeleton Warriors, so if you see anything that doesn't look right, definitely leave me a comment down below because I would be curious to see, because it's one of those games, some people really love this and I have played it, it's just not in my collection and it has been some time since I checked it out. But the controls are fluid, the graphics look nice, the sound has a blip or a blop here and there, but for the most part is just working. If there's any issues outside of those sound hitches, I can't tell in these captures. And that's the best thing you can say about a work-in-progress core like the Sega Saturn core. If you can't tell anything that is wrong with it, that means pretty much everything is just working right. But like I said earlier, if you're familiar with this game, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think of it. Now on the front of other games that just seem to be 100% working is Timebocon. Not only does it have an absolutely hilarious anime FMV intro with these pig, I think they might be pirates, I'm really not quite sure, but it also has spectacular music for the core. So go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds, I'll come back and show you more games that are just working pretty much perfectly. I mean, if there's anything wrong with Time Bokan's music, I cannot tell whatsoever, and graphically, this game is an absolute banger, and it's not one that you hear many people mention. This was not a viewer request. Andy D's been helping me with captures, and he picked it, and that clearly shows that Andy D has impeccable taste. He's a gentleman of means, and you should all thank him. But all jokes aside, I'm sure those are all true about Andy D, but this game is just so much fun, and on the current MiSter core, it just looks incredible. All of the 2D animations, the sprites, the vibrant colorways are just 100% looking exactly like you would expect. This is the type of game that if you load it up on the current core, you're not going to be able to tell any difference between real Sega Saturn hardware and FPGA. Now moving over to a game that last time that was tested, it would just freeze basically when it tried to load into the game, and is now working, is going to be Dead or Alive. And I was just recently playing this on Model 2 hardware. The Sega Saturn port is quite good, and what's going on here on MiSter is like 75 to 80% of the way there. All of the graphics are as to be expected, but there is a little bit of slowdown here and there, and it seems to happen either when both characters are striking at the same time or when there's a grapple going on, and you will see that ever so slightly shortly. But this is a game that a lot of people asked to be retested, and there's that slowdown right there. And it does work now. It's definitely still not 100% compared to regular Sega Saturn hardware, and the audio is hit or miss. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it is another game that is in the playable category, at least for certain people. Don't forget there are different results depending on what hardware you're using. There seems to be some discrepancies between the 2.5 and the 2.9 RAM modules right now, but no one's 100% sure why that is or whether it will change. So honestly, don't take anything from these tests. If it works for me and it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean it's not going to work for all of us in the future. And of course, you get an awesome anime FMV cutscene here. I guess anime is not the right word, it is CGI, but it does work, and that's so great to see. It doesn't hitch, it doesn't freeze, you don't need to mash start through it. It just looks like you would expect for Dead or Alive, which is to say, of its time and era, and all of the models definitely have that mid-90s look. But if you're looking for another game that is just currently working on the Sega Saturn core that you can play, this is definitely going to be one of them. Just remember that there is going to be some slowdown here and there, and I don't remember the Saturn version having much slowdown whatsoever, but leave me a comment down below. I actually do own a Model 2 arcade board for this game, so I never turned the Sega Saturn version on, but I know I'm definitely out of the ordinary when it comes to being able to say something like that about a game. And speaking of games, now we have Tempest 2000, and it's exactly that. It is a game, and it's an absolute banger of one as well, that has a spectacular soundtrack if you're so inclined into that musical genre. But it's another test on the new core as of 6/30, June 30th, and it is 100% working, and the soundtrack sounds perfection as far as my ear is concerned. Go ahead and listen for 40 seconds, and I'll come back and show you more games that just work. That just 100% sounds like Tempest 2000 to me. This game seems to be perfect. The controls are exactly what you'd expect, the visuals are exactly what you should be looking at, the music sounds good, and there are no blips, bloops, or blops, or hitches, whatever word you want to use, in any of the audio quality. So it seems like at least today, you could probably play Tempest 2000 until you beat it or until it froze. And don't forget, this core will and can freeze at any moment in time. It's just how it works, and that is where we currently are. But let's move on to another game that has improved, and what I'm going to be doing is mixing and matching footage here between the last test and the current core. This is Power Slave, and when I move over to a different shot, you're going to see a completely different lighting model, and that is because a lot of what this game is comes down to VDP1 and VDP2, and that has been changed. Because as soon as we move over to the June 30th core, you're going to see this game just come alive. All of the shadows, all of the real-time lighting, all of the things the developers at Lobotomy put in, and trust me, they were gurus when it came to coding for the Sega Saturn, are now here in the current core, and it looks so much fundamentally better. Even when you shoot these pots, those real-time lights that kind of cast their shadow and their light source on the wall, that is very important for the overall look and vibe of this game, and it is 100% here. But pay attention as we go down this elevator. All of those dark shadows and gradients on the wall going over to the light areas. And as we get out into this cavern here, it looks very dark and brooding, dramatic, and kind of has that horror vibe. If we move over to the previous core test that I still had a capture of, none of that lighting model is incorporated. It's probably just a call or direction to VDP 1 or 2 that was not currently strung together. But Power Slave needs that lighting model. So much of what this game is and the overall vibe is included in that kind of colorway and shadowscape, and it just works here. And it's so good to see a game like this improve, because even without it, it is a spectacular game and you should 100% play it. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you have or not. I would be curious. But with that new shadow model, it's so much better. Look at this right here, all these pots exploding, and let's move back to an old core. The difference is 100% night and day, and you cannot deny that the current core is doing it so much better. And this is real fundamental progress that SRG 320 is achieving that you can see visually, and that is obviously my favorite comparison. As a filmmaker, I want to show you something, not tell you about it, and this was the perfect way to show you. Because every time I give you an example of great audio, if I can't hear something or if I don't notice something, it's not as visual. But right here, what you're seeing is just amazing. It works, it looks so good, it's exactly what we want to see on progress for the Sega Saturn core, and it is just one of those games. Trust me, if you've never played it, you definitely have to check it out. Now moving over to the House of the Dead, a game that people asked to be retested, and it is one of those Sega Saturn classics. We're taking a look at it one more time again, and it does seem to be running at a better frame rate. Now there is no music. It tries to start, but then it seems to stop, and that is kind of common for cores that are having musical issues, but it does have sound effects, at least at this current stage of testing, and I will let you listen to those in just a moment so you can understand how it works. But a lot of what CD games are is the audio is going to be spooling off the disc for the music, and sound effects are loaded into ROM, so go ahead and listen to some sound effects and understand the difference between the two sources. And that is what it sounds like when sound effects files are loaded into RAM and playing as they're called for, versus Redbook audio, which is spooling off the compact disc in real time. So it seems like, at least for the House of the Dead, how that would spool the audio off the disc does not currently seem to be working. But as far as the visuals of the House of the Dead are concerned, yes, they are ugly. It is not anywhere near what the Model 2 original would do, but they look accurate for what the Sega Saturn should present, outside of a little bit of a clipping texture here and there. But I would say the House of the Dead is like 90 to 95% playable as far as the visuals and controls are concerned. And before you ask, no, at least currently there is no light gun support in this core, and of course playing this game with a controller is not the way you want to play it. You 100% want to have that light gun. I keep a light gun with my Saturn hooked up to my PVM, and this game very close by. So it's one of those things. It's not going to control well. That's because there is just a controller here, but this is running a lot better than the last time we tested the Sega Saturn core, and that is 100% awesome to see. Hopefully light gun support comes soon, because trust me, this game is a lot better when you actually have the light gun. Another game that people asked to see retested was Batsugan again, and it is working much better than the last time I showed it, or maybe the last time I showed it, it wasn't working whatsoever. But you will see here when we get in game, all of the graphics look exactly as you would expect. And interestingly, on my MiSter News video, the arcade board core is starting to get some work done on it as well on the schematic side. So it's Batsugan twice in 1 week, and you really can't complain about that. But this game is exactly what you would expect it to be visually, and the sound is quite good as well, so I will let you listen to that in just a moment. But if you've never checked this game out before, I can't recommend it enough. It's an absolute A+ shmup, pseudo bullet hell. It's not as bad as something like a cave game, but it's definitely going to throw a lot of projectiles at you. But what you're seeing here running on the MiSter core is exactly what you'd expect to see if you're running on real hardware, including the audio. So go ahead and listen for 35 seconds and I'll come back, because I got even more games to show you that just work. It's just another absolutely classic shmup and an absolutely classic Sega Saturn game, And in the current MiSter FPGA core revision, it's going to be a game that you can 100% enjoy. Now, this was not played from start to finish, so it is very possible that 10 seconds after this footage stops, the game will freeze 100% on you. You should not expect to be able to complete any game on the current Sega Saturn core. Don't go in dedicating your time to seeing an ending. You just be happy if you do. And I know people are asking when you can complete a certain game. I just genuinely do not know. The Sega Saturn has an absolutely stacked library, and just because I can complete something, I don't know if you can, because it is still organic. But one game that I've completed more than once from start to finish is Saturn Bomberman. So if you want to try one game to see the credits on, you can do a lot worse than that one, that's for damn sure. Now, taking a look at something that's a little bit interesting that people have been asking to see tests on, don't forget that the Sega Saturn does have a ROM cartridge port that can have both a 1 or 4 megabyte RAM expansion, as well as a memory card, as well as a ROM cartridge for certain games. That functionality has been incorporated into recent cores, so playing something like Real Bout Fatal Fury Special here, that does utilize one of those cartridges, it is working on the current core, and that is part of the thing about Saturn. It does have that RAM expansion the same way that the Nintendo 64 did, only the PlayStation 1 was the odd console out that never had a RAM expansion from that generation. And a lot of people have been asking to see footage from a game that utilizes one of those cartridges, and what better way than showing you my beating somebody up in an SNK game with those bounce physics, because you know you have to have them. But it is fun to see how that works, and the great part about MiSter is that it does not actually have a cartridge slot, because the cart slot on a Sega Saturn is quite finicky and it is quite delicate. If you take the cart in and out too many times, you can start having read issues where the pins in that slot are bent back and they are not making direct contact on the pads on the cartridge. That is just not a problem you're going to be dealing with MiSter. You're never going to have to open it up and start bending pins back. So that is an advantage to FPGA in an all honest situation. Not just making a joke there, it is better. Now, taking a look at Darkstalkers, another game that people have been asking me to test. Last time this was looked at, it did not work whatsoever. Now it is functioning. There is no audio, and this game can and will have some loading issues. I will show you what those look like, but Night Warriors Darkstalkers Revenge, an absolutely incredible game. I think this is better than Street Fighter 2, in all honesty. Leave me a comment down below and yell at me or tell me what you think. I would be curious. But the graphics here, impeccable. The control, responsive. It looks exactly like a Darkstalkers game should. It just doesn't have really any audio whatsoever. But the interesting thing is what happens when you actually go into loading screens. Because you'll see here, we did win this match. But when this game was first being loaded, thanks to Andy D for sending this capture along as well, you will see it says now loading, and it's going to kind of blop around here and there. You will see a demonstration of round 1. It's going to go back to now loading, but if you see a black screen, that means it froze. Just reset your core from the OSD menu, not resetting the entire MiSter, and hopefully it'll load again the next time. And that is kind of par for the course for certain games. Sometimes they don't load whatsoever, sometimes they load, and that's kind of the fun thing about testing this. No one's quite sure why that behavior actually persists. It just seems to be one of those situations where one load, everything works fine. The next load, there will be an issue. Because you'll see here, the match has been won. We're going to get the post-match text. And then it's going to go into the loading screen for the next match. You'll see here it says now loading, and then in just a moment those character intros are going to come up. We're going to be fighting against Bishamon here. After this, it will go into another loading screen, something the Saturn does that the CPS2 never does, and from here it is going to freeze again. That is just kind of how the core is currently going to be working. Your mileage may vary. Now, moving on to a viewer request, and one that I am surprised that anyone asked about because it's not a very well known game, is going to be Gunblaze S. This is an RPG that has some sort of visual novel flair going on with it as well, but it is quite interesting, and it's one more example of really good audio on the current MiSter core. So I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to listen to this one, and I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about the current core and how it's working. But enjoy!
Emulation. なんだよ、マークかよ。なんだとはご挨拶だな。一応客だぜ。客ってのはな、ちゃんと金を払う人のことを言うんだ。それを言われると辛い。まあいい。月末にはまとめて払ってもらわなくちゃな。
Good sound and really good voices as well as far as the real-time dialogue is concerned. And whoever asked for this, I've definitely forgot what your name was, but you are welcome. It is here, and it is working on the current MiSter core, and that is just a ton of fun. Unfortunately, there's no translation, so if you don't speak Japanese, you're going to have absolutely no idea what's going on, but I kind of wish I did know what was going on. But if you've played this game before, leave me a comment down below. It's one of those things I've never checked it out outside of doing videos like this, but it's always fun to discover something new. But that is your current batch of MiSter Sega Saturn tests. Some of these were from the 630 core and some were from before to show comparisons and contrasts. And again, big thanks to Andy D for helping me out with this one. We started doing it on a Friday and it is here Saturday morning. But there is a new core. You can start testing it today, and moving forward, every testing video will have footage from this core. It's so exciting to see, and it's so good to know SRG320 is still out there, still fine, and still plugging away at the work. Short of that, if you have any questions, leave me a comment down below, but I will see you guys next time. Happy weekend. Bye-bye.